I'm sure it's
Yeah, hi Jerry. Sorry? Take your seats. I want to begin punctually, deputies. Thank you. Good morning. Could deputies please all be seated? Thank you.
Yeah, fine, thanks.
Thank you. Welcome, deputies, to our first meeting in 2017, and I wish all deputies all the best for 2017. And it's good to be back after the winter break, and I thank all deputies who've come here on a very cold and wet day, particularly those who've travelled long distances, including Sharon Bannister, British Empire Medal. Mazal tov, Sharon. Deputies, the minutes of the meeting on the 20th of November have been circulated. We haven't heard of any revisions, and therefore, with your permission, I will sign them as a correct copy, a correct record. I now turn to my statements. A couple of introductory matters. On the 27th of January, in a couple of weeks' time, there is Holocaust Memorial Day. I want to pay tribute to the public authorities up and down the length and breadth of this country who are holding events for HMD. The number of such events is now in the thousands. They have shot up enormously, and I pay a huge tribute to bodies including the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust for raising the awareness of the public to HMD. As you know, the Jewish community's principal day of focus on the Shoah is Yom HaShoah, which we will be commemorating, as we have in previous years as a community, again this year at Alliance Cocktail Stadium on the 23rd of April. I'll mention that day now for your diaries. Sunday, the 23rd of April at 4:30, I think, but it's at that sort of time in the afternoon. I hope the community will come together. But I also hope and appeal to members of the community to give support to their local authority HMD events. I know that many of you are already doing so, and indeed many of you are an integral part of those events. But if local authorities, predominantly public authorities, not in any sense Jewish, many in constituencies or areas where hardly any Jews or no Jews live, are holding these events, it is absolutely right and proper that our community should play its full part and be involved and attend. And I also ask that we just pause for a moment just to remember Holocaust Memorial Day. On that day, indeed now for a second, to remember those victims, and we will come together again in April to do so again. Thank you. Now, I want to draw Deputies' attention to the sheet in the information about dates of board meetings. Unfortunately, this venue is unavailable in May and June, and that prompted some revisions to the normal schedule. So I know that deputies are all incredibly busy, but I hope your diaries for May, June, July, October and January, not 2018, were not already full. Please look at these dates. We moved the meeting on the 21st of May to the 14th of May because this hall wasn't available, and that means we've closed the gap from March, so that shouldn't be a problem. June also wasn't available, so we moved that day one day back to the 25th of June, and that meant that in order for a sensible gap of 4 weeks between meetings, the July meeting is now 1 week later on the 23rd of July, which is good also because it closes a gap over the August period. We meet in September. The November meeting has been moved forward. This is something we've already given notice of, to the 29th of October, so that we can take part in the widespread communal commemoration of the Balfour Centenary celebration. We will be having a Balfour Declaration themed meeting on the 29th of October, and so there won't be a meeting in November, and we've moved the January meeting forward a week. I'm not going to, the Executive Committee has approved all those dates, and there will always be some winners and some losers, but I don't think we need to have a debate on the matter. Those will be the dates of the meetings up to January 2018. Please put them in your diary. Anyone lost a glove? I'm told that it was found on the stairs quite early on, so probably someone who came early to the meeting. Thank you, we have a finder. Good. That's probably the best thing I'm going to do all morning. Deputies, it's my enormous pleasure to pay tribute today to one of our members who's been a deputy for 18 years and has recently moved to Birmingham and will cease to be a deputy for the Representative Council of North East Jewry, and that is Bernard Schaffer. And Bernard is here. Bernard, can you just wave? And you're sitting next to your long-suffering wife, Michelle, because Bernard is a fantastic deputy, assiduous locally, assiduous in attending our meetings, meaning a 600-mile round trip and a long period away from home, and he also travelled quite a bit for work. And he has been a fantastic deputy in organising study tours, hosting presidents, including me, in Newcastle, doing a marvellous job, organised the civic ceremony at Newcastle for HMD, and hosted just this summer the Israel ambassador to a very, very well-attended meeting in Newcastle, and he also has a strong role as a liaison with the Gateshead Jewish community, and he's highly respected at Gateshead Council, where he worked, he will continue to commute from Birmingham and provide some training a few times a year at Gateshead. Bernard, may I pay tribute to all you have done for the community. You are a model communal member, a model deputy, and we'll miss you. And I join in that, Michelle, of course, for all you've done in supporting Bernard. I now want to mention a less happy matter which occurred this week, and that is when I found on Thursday that the Executive Committee report had been posted on social media, on the internet, by a deputy who I do not intend naming. Now, I think most deputies will instinctively know that reports for this meeting are not to be put on the internet for very obvious reasons. True it is that there will be matters that will be referred to at our meeting today, but that's today. And as chair of the meeting, if there's anything that I think would be too sensitive or too confidential or risk any legal action against any individual or indeed our board, then I would be able to make sure that that wasn't mentioned or taken out of the live stream record. If anyone is in doubt about it, committee division reports, reports of the Executive Committee, minutes of meetings, and other items that are part of the paperwork that deputies get are confidential to deputies. I think most of you knew that, and it's pretty obvious as a matter of simple common sense. In future, we're going to place some words on board documents that make it entirely clear for those who weren't sure already. And in the Code of Conduct, it makes clear under paragraph 2.2, deputies must not disclose information which by its nature is confidential and which has been acquired through their role, other than where proper authorization has been given. Now, there are quite a few times when deputies write and say they would like to pass this report or that report to their own synagogue, particularly a board of management meeting where they're reporting what's happened at the board and how much good the board is doing. And that permission will readily be given, but again, that's with the safeguard that if there's a sentence there we think would be unwise, we will ask that that is deleted from mention. So I very much hope that this breach of confidentiality will not be repeated again. It was made a little bit worse, and I'm going to move on to a different point, by the fact that the deputy in question utilised the report in order to make a snide remark about the board and its honorary officers. Now, this deputy has rather a habit of doing that, and much of the snideness and the mockery is directed at me personally. Now, I have broad shoulders, and I really don't mind, but and it's nothing to do with me personally, but I want to make a wider point. Social media is a powerful medium. If it's used wisely, it can be very, very positive. It can also be a great force for harm. One of the things that I notice, because so much seems to flow past my social media accounts, is there is an increasing tendency for people to mock or worse, insult other people's views within our community, particularly when it comes to Israel, but not always. As you know, I frequently made appeals in our community to improve the level of the way that we have conversations with each other. I think it's pretty awful sometimes that the level of civil discourse can be really quite unpleasant. Now, we absolutely must feel free to take issue with each other and take issue to your heart's content, including with me. But can we please, I appeal, not just turn down, but turn off the level of mockery, satire, snideness, and general insult, which I don't think is conducive to good community relations and frankly is unseemly for a community with our reputation. And let's always remember that we have far more opponents out there, and we simply cannot afford the luxury of dividing between ourselves, not on views. We can divide on views, but not on insults, please. Thank you. I now have pleasure in mentioning the regional weekend that is going to take place on the 17th to the 19th of March, so in accordance with the diary you already have. Now, let nobody say that this board is uncaring or ignorant about smaller communities. This is the first time, I think, that the board's regional meeting is to take place in what is, on any basis, one of our smallest regional communities, but it's in one of Britain's most beautiful cities, Exeter, in the southwest. I don't know if Richard Yoffe is here for Deputy for Exeter. He was last time. I am absolutely delighted that the board has accepted Exeter's invitation to come there for Shabbat and have our board meeting on Sunday. I totally commend the Exeter community who are putting themselves out hugely to accommodate us. I also would like to take the opportunity to commend my wonderful board assistant, Bernice Black, who you all know and love. Is she sitting there, Bernice? I can't see her. She's downstairs. But she is moving heaven and earth to put this weekend together. Deputies, Exeter does not have the communal infrastructure of pretty much anywhere where we've held meetings before. You will need to bear with us. There are hotel rooms. We may be scattered across a few hotels. The halls that we're going to use, both at the Shul and also the local guild hall, are smaller than we're used to. The facilities for recording and other things may be more difficult. It's not easy, but please bear with us and we'll do our best. Also on Shabbat morning, on Friday night, there'll be 2 services, but space is limited. There will be the progressive deputies will hold their service on Friday night in the Shul, and there will also be an Orthodox Kabbalat service upstairs. The space is limited, but it should be enough. On Shabbat morning, there will be a typical Exeter service led by Reverend Elkan Levy, Minister for Small Communities before his retirement, who's coming from Israel specially for the occasion. But there will be some arrangements that won't be absolutely typical of a mainstream Orthodox United service, but it will be Orthodox, and I'll talk to any deputies who want to talk to me about that afterwards. But if Elkan Levy approves them, it's fine by me. I hope it's fine by everyone. As I say, give us a little bit of a slack on this. And we hope that as many deputies as possible will join us in Exeter for what promises to be a really lovely weekend. Now, on my President's statement, if there's any points arising on any of those things, we can take them at the end. On my President's statement, I was sorry to note, that's not the right way of putting it, I was distressed to note the terror attack in Jerusalem a few days ago. 4 young soldiers in training lost their lives. And it's a reminder to us that terrorism continues to disfigure lives both in Israel and indeed in Europe and in Turkey. I'll move on to the next item, UN Security Council Resolution 2334. I know there's going to be a number of people who want to speak about this. I make no apology for contacting deputies over the Christmas holiday. I was busy in the Christmas holiday. I've made our views very clear. The only thing I want to add is that on Wednesday, I got an invitation at short notice to see the Middle East Minister, Tobias Ellwood. I had over an hour with the Minister. and I was able to set out very, very clearly and robustly the misgivings in our community regarding Resolution 2334. And I just want to make this really clear. Irrespective of one's views about the settlement issue, on which, of course, I'm aware there is a wide range of views within the community, as there is in Israel. Irrespective of that, my problems with Resolution 2334 are different. They certainly might include a settlement matter. Some people will feel that way, some people will not. But I felt this to be the wrong text, at the wrong time, and is in fact destructive of peace. I do not accept, and the minister didn't accept, despite the resolution, that the Kotel, or the Jewish quarter, amounts to a settlement or should be slated to fall outside Jewish control. The minister was indignant when I said to him that could be an interpretation of the text. I think, to me, it's about the only interpretation of the text. He said, no way. We're absolutely, as British government, do not accept for a moment that the Kotel will fall outside Israeli control. Well, that's an immediate problem with the text, but I'm glad he said it. That's at least the UK government's view at the moment. But there are other problems with the resolution. The resolution refers in very weak terms to incitement and terror, and if you look at the wording of the resolution, it actually calls on both parties to refrain from incitement and terror. Well, I'm very sorry, that's not good enough. Why didn't it refer to Palestinian incitement and terror? I haven't noticed any Israeli terrorism or Israeli incitement. I think that was wrong, and the wording of the resolution was very, very unfortunate. The minister told me it was meant to refer purely and strictly to the terror coming from certain parts of Palestinians. Another problem with the resolution. Then there was paragraph 5, which calls on all nations to distinguish in their dealings between Israel and territory occupied from 1967. That is an open invitation to boycott. And it runs counter, therefore, to the government's own view. And lastly, 223 resolutions hostile to Israel at the United Nations, and 8 about Syria. And that really says it all. Fewer still, I think, about North Korea. The minister accepted, as indeed Secretary General Ban Ki-moon accepted, that the UN had a disproportionate focus on Israel and that it hindered peace. And so I say again, this was, irrespective of what your views are about settlements, this was, even if you abhor settlements, this was the wrong resolution at the wrong time, and it's harmful to those who care about peace. Now, I will hear some questions and views about that, and I did my best to express what I believe the consensus of the community is, gleaned from my own postbag and also from talking to communities, as I do almost every week, including in the last few weeks, one of my local shuls in Boreham Wood, and also in Leeds, and also at a communal reception in Manchester. So any questions to me on that, please? Yes, I see some hands over there. Is that Natalie Shaw? Do I see? I can see the hand, but I can't always see the face. Lawrence Brass, yes. Amos Schonfield, yes. Tal Edo. Let's start with that for the moment. Would you like to go to the microphone there? We've put the microphone back there so that you don't have to have your backs to me, although I don't mind. Natalie, I think you're first. Can you make your way to the microphone?
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you very much for your general response in your report, and indeed just now in your statement in relation to the very concerning events connected to UN Resolution 2334. Your interventions on behalf of a vast majority of the UK British community are very much appreciated. In addition, can you also please answer the core part of our group's question, which was to ask for advice as to what actions will be taken against those whose behaviour has been in contravention of a board constitution, which we as co-signatories from 18 different member organisations have raised. Thank you.
Lawrence Brass, Bushy United. Mr. President, as you know, I have a home in Israel to where I and my family frequently visit. And I have to tell you that my friends in Israel, and indeed here in London, did not interpret the UN resolution in the way that you have done as being anti-Israel. Rather, the view which I share is that if you believe in the principle of a two-state solution, then it's time for us to state unequivocally that Israel must freeze all settlement activity immediately. The settlement... Can I give a good example? The settlement of Ammona, for example. In remarkable rebuke, Israel's Supreme Court ruled that the Ammona settlement being built on Palestinian-owned land is illegal. The judges ordered the Israeli military to demolish the illegal settlement by the end of December. Have they done so? No. It hasn't happened because in a flagrant disregard of the rule of law, the Israeli government is trying to postpone the eviction, and worse still, the Knesset is trying to retrospectively legitimize this illegal settlement. Now, I've not seen any criticism by the board of this appalling behavior, and as long as we continue to turn a blind eye to such activities, then this extremist Israeli government will press on regardless. The UN resolution was a diplomatic debacle. It's a pity Prime Minister Netanyahu couldn't sack his foreign minister. Of course he couldn't, because he is the bloody foreign minister. He takes those powers to himself. But of course, he relies on the uncritical support of the diaspora to survive. Please be aware, Mr. President, that your condemnation of the UN resolution and the board's, in my view, wrong support for the protest rally last Sunday caused huge disappointment to many members of our community who love Israel, like I do, but aren't prepared to sign blank checks for whatever the Israeli government does. I've said before, and I say again without apology, this board must not be an extension of the Israeli embassy. The policy of this board of deputies has always been to support a two-state solution.
Lawrence, you're on amber.
The UN resolution,
Lawrence, you must wind up. You're on red now.
as well as rightly condemning Palestinian terror and reaffirming Israel's right to exist in peace, condemns illegal settlements. So do I, and so should this board.
Good morning. Amos Schonfield, Deputy for Yachad. In the 23 days since the UN Resolution 2334 passed, the sky hasn't fallen, but we have seen some fairly bad spin, so I want to try and address some of that. Now, we talk about the anti-Israel bias of the UN, and I think it's really important to distinguish between UN institutions. The Human Rights Council, UNESCO, very problematic organs. When we talk about the number of resolutions, Jonathan, the Security Council passed 11 resolutions in 2016 regarding Sudan and South Sudan, 6 on Syria and Libya respectively, and there was just 1 on Israel-Palestine, this one. Now, it's worth taking a close look at the reading of the resolution, the actual wording. I've left copies in the back, I printed them off, I'm very generous. It reiterates Israel's right to exist, the right of Israeli citizens to live free from terror. It condemns incitement and states the obligation of the Palestinian Authority to dismantle terror infrastructure. It reaffirms the importance of negotiations, and it states that it will not recognise changes to the Green Line other than those agreed by the parties through negotiations. This highlights that a negotiated peace settlement will settle final borders, not weird institutions. Now, it also makes no assumptions on what the final borders of Israel will be, not based on any of the single 33 peace settlements that potentially exist at the moment, and it doesn't make any arrangements regarding the holy sites in Jerusalem. The resolution demands Israel cease all settlement activities in the Palestinian territory and states that the settlement enterprise has no legal validity and is a major obstacle to achieving peace. Paragraph 5 that you mentioned, Jonathan, is a mirror of what the EU signed in a bilateral trade agreement with Israel. It's nothing new. 2334 also doesn't change the UK's position on Israel at all. The UK-Israel relations have never been stronger. The UK remains Israel's second largest trading partner with bilateral trade of $5 billion. UK policy has consistently been that settlements are illegal under international law, and demanding that Israel freeze all settlement activity in the West Bank was a policy adopted by the UN via the Quartet Roadmap. Now, the resolution itself, despite what the statement said, is not roundly condemned by Herzog or Livni. They were directed their statements towards Prime Minister Netanyahu, who failed to spot how poor relationship with Obama and ill-thought-out legislation at home could be problematic. And also, that Yachad reaching out to government is nothing new on this account. Yachad was the only Jewish organisation to write directly to the British UNESCO representative in advance of the absurd motion on Jewish history in Jerusalem, and that was covered by the Jewish News and The Guardian, but there was no unequivocal condemnation then, was there? Now, lastly, I want to quickly turn to the people who wrote about...
Amos, you're on amber. And
okay, I just want to quickly turn to the 20 people who wrote about me, if that's okay. Now, they called me a moral failure. They called me... What else did they call me? I'm just going to have to find it. They called me monstrous. I know. But these people didn't
have to wind up
Rosalind,
now.
you're the only person who emailed me. You're the only person who showed the professionalism and the courage to email me to talk about the resolution. 19 people didn't. 19 people didn't write to me as their fellow deputy to find out what they thought.
Hey, Amos, you must wind up now. On red,
okay.
That's it.
I'm finished.
Thank you.
Please reach out to me. Thank you.
Tal for Chigwell and Hainault. Mr. President, it was really bizarre to read in your President's statement that you say any comparison and link in mass murder and barbarity in Syria or anywhere else is apparently absurd. I absolutely agree with you that such a comparison is an absurd, but it was you who made the original comparison between UN Security Council Resolution 2334 and the lack of action on Syria. We as Jews shouldn't be afraid to speak out against the atrocities in Syria, as well as we shouldn't be afraid to criticize the government of Israel for a despicable and opportunistic move to skip a vote on Syrian war crimes in order to pacify President Putin, who then had voted for Resolution 2334. I noted that he had nothing to say about Russia, and I wonder why. I fully understand why the government of Israel is upset with the resolution. What I do not understand is why our statement sounds as if it was drafted by Netanyahu. The official policy of the Board of Deputies is support for the two-state solution. That's the view, as well, of the majority of Israelis and British Jews. Why then you are disappointed with the resolution that seeks to keep the two-state solution alive? The answer is clear, because of the settlements. You were careful not to mention it in your statement originally, but it can't be explained in any other way, I'm afraid. Expanding settlement outside the major blocks and building illegal outposts put facts on the ground that makes the two-state solution impossible. It's not me who just say it, it's Israeli diplomats who say it too. It is now time for Israel to realize that the status quo is no longer an option. Israel needs to listen to its allies. Since Netanyahu's famous Bar-Ilan speech in 2009, where he claimed to say that he was in support of the two-state solution, he said the following: the territorial question will be discussed as part of the final peace agreement. In the meantime, we have no intention of building new settlements or of expropriating additional land for existing settlements. End of quote. Since then, we saw more construction of settlements and lately an absurd law to legalize retroactively illegal outposts. I know that some will discuss the resolution in regards to Jerusalem, as you did, but the American administration has been quite clear throughout the last decades, and including in John Kerry's last speech, that the US recognizes Jewish historic ties to Jerusalem and say that it respects and defends those ties. Continuous building in West Bank doesn't act in Israel's security interest, quite the opposite. If this construction continues, it is inevitable that we will have a one-state solution in which Israel will have to give full rights to the Palestinians in the West Bank, and that will change the demographics dramatically. This is not what Israelis want, this is not what British Jews want to see. While the settlements are not the only issue why there is no peace agreement, it is a major issue that creates tension and friction. It is obviously up to Israel's government to decide its policy, but it's important the Israeli government to hear the opinion of diaspora Jews. We care and love the state of Israel, but that doesn't mean we have to agree with each action of the Israeli government. This is what the board said in 2014. The Israeli government, the board of deputies, and the British Jews support a two-state solution.
Tal, thank you very much. You must wind up now. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Thank you very much
Thank you.
indeed.
Ido Ben Shaul, West London Synagogue. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I'm not going to make a very hotly debated political point. Instead, I actually want to make two commendations. One of them is for Jonathan, that managed, in my eyes, to trod on the very fine line politically in his comments about the UN resolution and various other issues. I think he truly represented the variance in the opinions of his board when he made his points pretty much avoiding taking a very strict political position. So I think it was very well done. The second one, it has nothing to do with the UN resolution, but it has to do with Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London, who basically gave a Hanukkah party for the London Jewish community, in which he made a very short but very nice speech showing that he really cares and he really did his research. And I was very positively surprised by his openness and by his attitudes. And I was very hesitant when I voted for him, but now I'm actually quite happy I have done so. I think that we have a mayor that actually does care about our little, or not so little community. Thank you.
Now, I'm particularly interested perhaps in hearing some views that haven't necessarily been given before. Now, I'm going to try and find deputies who don't usually speak. So the lady, I'm sorry, I don't know your name. I can't see you clearly enough. Would you come first then? Thank you very much. Good. And Flora Frank. And yes, the gentleman with the glasses. Sorry, I can't see you clearly. Oh, now I can. Thank you. Right. Okay. Rosalind Pine. Jonathan Davies, and then I get one more, which will be Robert Sachs. Forgive me, Lionel, on this occasion. Sorry. Yes, I did. Yes. I'm awfully sorry. I didn't recognise you.
Mary Rainier Lee from Western Marble Arch Synagogue. I didn't prepare a speech. I wasn't expecting to speak, but what I do want to say is something completely different. Wind back and look at the legal position. Everybody says Israel's illegal occupation of the West Bank. Under the Geneva Convention, which nobody bothers to look at anymore because it's honoured in its complete disregard, Israel is entitled to be present in the occupied, what they call the occupied territories, until there's been a final settlement. So Israel is not in illegal occupation of the West Bank. It was abandoned by Jordan, who went there in 1948, uninvited and without any legal right to it. That's the current legal position. The next point on the settlements. Some settlements will be illegal, some are not. And for people to try and boycott or say that all settlements are illegal or not, I do not agree with the attempt to set aside the settlement that was the subject of the legal procedure in Israel. It was taken from Arabs unlawfully, and it should be given back. There is a balance. It's not either no settlements and give up the whole of the West Bank. It is a fair settlement, fair to those who fought the 1948 war, those who died in the 1967 war. Nobody talks about the Jews who lived in Jerusalem in the Jewish quarter who no longer were able to live there under Jordanian occupation. Nobody talks about the refugees from Iraq or Syria, the Jewish refugees, or the last ones in Baghdad that didn't get out fast enough and were hanged from the lampposts. So let's just wind back, remember what is lawful and what isn't, and everybody who keeps saying, oh, the illegal occupation of the West Bank, don't know what they're talking about, and they're dishonouring the Geneva Convention, which is dishonoured all the time throughout the Middle East. Thank you.
Okay, Michael Reich from Mosaic Reform. A number of different points. I first would like to take up the point about incitement to terror. Unfortunately, there is incitement to terror from Israel, but within Israel. And some actions should be taken definitely, and I've seen nothing taking place. The synagogue in Ra'anana was desecrated about 1 or 2 months ago, the Progressive Synagogue, with various notices asking for the death of Gilad Kariv and of Anat Hoffman, and asking this, and this is a direct result of the work taking place by a number of the very orthodox rabbis within Israel, some of whom are actually people within the Knesset. It would be good if Israel would look at its own internal politics from time to time, instead of totally concerning themselves with external politics. I would also like to say I was very, very disappointed at the attitude of Netanyahu to the vote. He should realize, as foreign minister and as prime minister, he's also a diplomat, and he should not have called together all the various countries and castigated them. He has to work with them, and he should realize that in diplomacy there is a matter of diplomacy that helps Israel in foreign lands as well as in their own land. And I think to have the Prime Minister of Israel wanting to throw his toys out of the pram does not help the country. Having said all that, I disagree with the resolution because I felt it was far too one-sided in that, and I was very proud to actually go to the demonstration last week opposite the House of Commons. But there are various different attitudes that we have in this situation, and we shouldn't make it too one-sided.
Mary?
British Emunah, I believe in the right of freedom of speech, and notwithstanding that, I also believe that we're allowed to say what we want, but within a friendly atmosphere in this room where we are all friends, whatever our religious persuasions or political persuasions. But what I think is completely out of order is when certain groups, and I'm going to name one of them, and it's Yachad, and I'm not ashamed to say it, I believe, and I strongly believe, they're violating the Constitution. I'll tell you why. Because in the and it says here, expressing our bond with Israel. All right, it could be done in many ways. But to take such appropriate actions as lie within its power to advance Israel's security, welfare and standing, to support and seek to protect Jews and Jewish communities outside the UK. I feel that the way they are behaving, and other such groups, they're not the only ones, it does not help Israel's cause. It ruins, and I have written here, I think we have to say it loudly and clearly that they are destroying Israel's standing as an amazing democracy who uphold human rights both in the battlefield and in civilian life, and they're ruining Israel's image in the world. How can they in any way justify, and I wrote the word outrageous, but perhaps I should put that in parentheses, how can they justify their actions and maintain that they have Israel's welfare at heart? Stop being armchair critics. I live in Israel most of the time. I have Israeli citizenship. My family live on Yehuda v'Shomron. I don't call it the occupied territories. Come and live there and see how the people have to go about their daily work, wondering if they're going to come home again, if they're going to be killed. Go and live there and see what's going on. And I want to just end by saying, I saw a video very late last night. My cousin from Australia sent it to me. It was taken at Hanukkah, and it was a celebration with the Australian Prime Minister. And the rabbi, I couldn't get his name, said, "We are just celebrating Hanukkah. Israel did not stand on occupied territory then, and they're not standing on occupied territory now." So I hope our detractors hear this.
Robert Sachs, Belsize Square Synagogue. Firstly, I'd like to identify myself with the previous speaker. I agree with some of the points she made. I was very distressed in learning that Yachad had not only supported the resolution, but had actually asked the British government to support the resolution. Yachad is a member of this board. The question is whether they consulted with the board before making the decision to support the resolution and indeed to approach the British government. I think they should have consulted, or at least had the courtesy to tell the board that they would be taking that stand. My own position is a curse on the houses of both the extreme left and the extreme right. They are destroying Israel. They are doing the work of the Palestinian terrorists for them. We need to stand together. I voted for Yachad to be a member of this board. I have been appalled by some of the things the extreme right have done. My South African experience makes me feel as though this is déjà vu. I'm not for 1 minute suggesting that this is apartheid. But there is such a thing as justice, and Israel is not getting justice. One of those who voted for this resolution was the People's Democratic Republic of China, bastion of freedom of speech and human rights. They also occupy a little country, as you know, forgotten which one? Tibet. Strikes me, Alavai, Israel should be faced with a leader of terrorists who goes around preaching love and peace, and whose adherents are not even allowed to pull out the wings of moths. And this is a country that has voted against us. It makes me sad that we as a people cannot risk taking this to the International Court for Justice. We will not get justice. This week, the Vatican recognized Palestine as a state. Palestine cannot be recognized in law. It does not have agreed borders. Thank you.
President, I'll pick up on, I will be brief and therefore won't actually comment on the substance of the UN resolution. Because beg your pardon, Jonathan Davis, Golders Green United Synagogue. I will be brief and won't actually pick up on the substance of the UN resolution, because I want to take issue with the comments about Jihad and your own comments in your statement in which you, quote, unequivocally condemn the actions of Jihad. I believe that is stepping across a very dangerous red line in respect of the relationship between the board and a constituency and individual deputies. You may, Mr. President, disagree with Jihad, and individual deputies may disagree with you. And that is a question for the debate for us to have. But it is surely the individual right of every deputy and every constituency, not speaking on behalf of the board, but speaking as individuals and as a constituency, to express their views, and if they consider it appropriate, to express those views publicly and to express those views to government. This board is when constituencies come together and seek to establish a consensus of the views of the Jewish community as a whole. It is not, however, a place where constituencies come in and become bound by collective responsibility to accept the view of the board, overriding their own views if their own views differ. And with regard to the constitutional points which previous speakers referred to, the Constitution sets out the obligations and duties of the board. It does not prohibit or prescribe the rights of individual constituencies and individual deputies to have their views and express those views. And I would invite you, therefore, Mr. President, whilst you may say in your presidential statement you disagree with the views of Jihad, I do not think it is right for you to condemn a constituency of the board.
Rosalind Pine, North Salford Synagogue. I think that this resolution was actually not about settlements or two-state solution. It was about accelerating the demise of Israel, because by returning to what that great statesman called, Abba Eban, the Labour statesman, the Auschwitz borders, that will signal the end of Israel. But let me just say that when I heard about this resolution, and in fact its continuum is taking place today in Paris, the gathering there, which is a continuation of this, I immediately thought about the Dreyfus affair. And it's interesting because sometimes events have unintended consequences. And if people remember what actually happened, you had this young journalist from Hungary covering an Austrian paper, Theodor Herzl, who was a totally uncommitted secular Jew. And he was standing there at the defrocking, waiting for the whole ceremony to start, the disgracing, and he knew that the army in France was anti-Semitic. But what shocked him to the core was when members of his own press corps, whom he thought were enlightened people, were screaming death to the Jews. And at that point, he realized that something has to be done, and the rest is history, because within 50 years, a Jewish state was born. And that was the unintended consequence. And really, what we're seeing is, this is just another Dreyfus. As far as illegal and legal is concerned, I'm sorry, Lawrence, I don't know what your field of law is, but it's certainly not international law. It's very interesting because, as it's been pointed out, the UN actually contravened its own Article 80 of its charter, which seeks to protect any and all previous binding agreements. And all those binding agreements come from 1920 and 1922, the League of Nations signed by 51 members. And I came across this quite interesting. Between 1920 and 1925, there was a report of the High Commissioner on the Administration of Palestine, which said, any attempt to negate the Jewish people's right to Palestine and deny them access and control in the area designated for the Jewish people by the League of Nations is an actionable infringement of international law, and it remains the same. That is all the land west of the Jordan River. But looking at history is quite interesting. 42 years ago, there was the infamous Zionism equals racism resolution. And Chaim Herzog got up at the United Nations and he said the following. He's talked about this gathering of despots and racists at the United Nations. And he said the following. He said, this resolution is but a passing episode in a rich event history of our people. It's
Ros, you have to wind up now.
Based on hatred, falsehood, and arrogance, devoid of any moral or legal value. This is no more than a piece of paper, and we shall treat it as such.
Thank you, Ros. Now, forgive me, deputies, including I know there are a number of deputies who want to speak, and I would normally have called, including a past president, but I think we've had a pretty good range of views, and I doubt that much more could be said on any side of the discussion that hasn't already been said. I shall therefore just venture a few very brief comments. I want to say to a number of speakers, including not only my colleague as an honorary officer previously, Lawrence Brass, I don't think that the board is the right place to deliver lectures to a country where we don't live, we don't vote, we don't pay taxes, and above all, we don't undergo the daily realities of life in that country. Nor do I think it right that anyone should call the democratically elected government of Israel an extremist government, unless you want to live there and you exercise your vote. And I'm sorry, but having a holiday home in Herzliya Patuach doesn't really give you any better right. And therefore I agree with Prime Minister Theresa May when she criticised, in a very unusual move, Secretary of State John Kerry's criticism of an Israeli government as extremist. The Prime Minister was right. To Amos Schonfield, the Deputy for Yachad, can I just say, Yitzhak Herzog, Tzipi Livni, as I said in my statement, roundly condemned the resolution. They, of course, also made remarks directed against the Prime Minister, their opposition leaders, but it was notable to me that they condemned the resolution unequivocally, and it's therefore striking that the Yachad statement actually supported the resolution, and I was surprised at that because I really do wonder what constituency Yachad speaks for. Yachad did not consult me, or as far as I know, any of my honorary officer colleagues before writing to the government. I disagree with Jonathan Davies when he said that Yachad had a right to express its views to government. Yachad has a right to express its views publicly, absolutely. But just imagine if every section of the Jewish community that had a view and an interest on these matters wrote to the government. How would it look if you're sitting at the Foreign and Commonwealth Office opening the post, if you were to get 20 letters from different communal organisations, or 100 letters or 1,000 letters from within the Jewish community, all saying something different? Isn't the point of having a Board of Deputies, and we are the only democratic representative body of the community, and as is apparent from listening to our discussion today, live streamed on the internet so that anyone can be listening to it wherever they are, all over the United Kingdom and over the world. And our analysis has shown that we are having people watching us from all over the world. We are the expression of the community's views. It is absolutely fair to say, as I told the Minister on Wednesday, that there is a range of views within our community over the settlements. I told him that there's a range of views over many things, but speaking for the consensus of the community, because of course the community is never going to be 100% view on anything. 3 Jews, 5 opinions, everybody knows that. But I believe it's the consensus that's important. And Yachad's view as a particular grouping, and not a very big grouping at that, number of members, I think, was so small that the board had to vote affirmatively to admit them by 2/3 vote, because I don't think they came up to the constitutional normal minimum. It's a small group. There are other groups that are much larger. And therefore, I don't think it is sensible, even if they have a legal right to do it, I don't think it's appropriate for separate groups to write to government. And my appeal to all organisations in the community, please don't write to government, write to me and ask me to express your point of view as part of the range of points of view, because that's what I do all the time. When governments consult the board, for example, over vexed issues, I'm not drawing a direct comparison, but vexed issues of, say, personal status, marriage, single-sex marriage, I represent a multiplicity of views, and I'm very clear that there's a range of views, and that's what I will always try to do. Tal affair. This time last year I went to Moscow and I met President Putin, and I can tell you then that I was very clear with the board afterwards. I think the words I used was that President Putin was no saint. We do criticise Russia. I made it clear then, indeed, when I even had a rather vigorous discussion with President Putin. It's not going to happen to me every day, so I made the most of it. I made it clear the problems we have with Russian policy, in particular in the Middle East, in particular in arming the Syrian regime, and in particular with weapons being transferred to Hezbollah. And I reported on that at the time. So no, we are absolutely not frightened of expressing the view. To those deputies who commented, I want to say how much I agreed with the views of, have I got the name right, the deputy from Western Marble Arch, Mary Regnier Lee. Have I got your name right? I think I have. Because what Mary said was that it's not a zero-sum game. It's not a question of settlements or no settlements, or occupied territory, if that's what you wish to call it, or no occupied territory. I don't believe Yachad think, even Yachad, that the Kotel should become part of a Palestinian state. And that, if they don't believe that, then it's quite clear that there is no such thing as one blue line, definable border. Israel, can I remind deputies, in the 67 years, my maths right, since its creation, has never had a border because there's never been direct negotiation. And in the end, and the minister agreed with me, and his statement said it, the only way that the Middle East conflict between Israelis and Palestinians is going to be resolved is the same way that any conflict has to be resolved, not by imposition from on top, but by negotiations between the parties where you compromise. And we are all waiting and praying for the day when there can be that negotiation and there can be that compromise. And finally, can I just say this about those who talk about the board's constitution? I think Jonathan Davies was right when he said that the Constitution expresses obligations on the Board of Deputies. I do not read the Constitution, and nor does the Constitution Committee, whose advice I took on this recently as a result of a debate in the summer. We do not read the Constitution as requiring every deputy or every organisation that is represented on the board to have a particular view or not to have a particular view. I don't think a constitution was ever designed with that in mind. But I also want to say very clearly, I think most deputies know that I in particular am not a supporter of the views of Yachad. When the previous honorary officer sat at this table and I was the vice president, and 2 years ago the question of Yachad's membership of the board came up, I voted against. I was the only honorary officer who did. The majority of deputies voted in favour on the inclusivist principle, and I respect their decision. I am not in favour of expelling anyone from the Board of Deputies. I don't think that's the way to do it. I think it was very clear to any organisation sitting here where the balance of views lies, or indeed where the board does not have a balance of views, it has a range of views. I think that if someone holds an unpopular view, they will hear it here on the floor of the board. I don't think it's right that we expel them because the majority of us don't agree with that view, and I'm not going to go down that path. Thank you. Now, we do need to move on with the President's statement. Before I do, and I very much hope Sir Ivan will not be cross with me, and I very much hope, Sir Ivan, we won't embarrass you, but I do want to congratulate you on celebrating a very significant birthday on the 24th of December. Sir Ivan, it's a pleasure to see you return to the board. We wish you health and strength in the years ahead. I also want to draw deputies' attention to the announcements. There are a number of Mazel Tovs, which please treat as read. I'll add another one. You saw in the announcements that Jo Wagerman had celebrated the wedding of her granddaughter. Well, incidentally to the son of another deputy. Well, Jo Wagerman is now celebrating the engagement of a different granddaughter, Gabby, and I wish the past president Mazel Tov on that. Now, moving on in my statement, New Year's honours. I congratulate every member of our community who was deserving of an honour. I've already mentioned Sharon Bannister. Limud, I was very pleased to be at Limud for 2 days. The board's presence at Limud made a splash. We were effective, we were popular, we helped some speakers to come. I think we did credit to the reputation of Yachad. Senior Vice President Richard, I think, had a very successful session on, amongst other things, vodka. You may draw such inferences as you wish. I think he's sober today. And finally, an important matter. I've answered it quite briefly, but I do want to underscore the concern I have on the free school applications. Frankly, I'm somewhat disappointed at the rejection of the applications. The board takes a neutral view as between applications, of course. But I rather thought that the objections voiced by the DFE were odd, because I don't think that in regard to the time given to Jewish studies in the curriculum or other matters such as community cohesion, these applications in any way stepped outside the pattern established by existing Jewish schools. So we are now in a process of consultation with the school applicants. We're going to take it step by step. The school applicants are receiving detailed feedback from the Department for Education. When that is to hand and we've assessed it, and if in consultation with the school applicants we think it would be right for the board to take a personal intervention, then I will have no hesitation in contacting the Secretary of State and seeing members of the team to the extent that we can further the cause of Jewish schooling generally. And I do regard this as a matter of importance, not least because I had a 14-year exposure myself to the process of creating Jewish schools, and I know what an arduous process it is. Now, I've answered, I hope, all the questions, I think more questions than we've ever had, in my statement. I will now, we've got perhaps 10 minutes left in the timetable. Are there any other matters not previously discussed which deputies wish to raise on the basis that they're fairly pressing to do so? I'm going to try and call deputies, forgive me, who haven't yet spoken. Jonathan, Richard Cohen, Michael, you've spoken. No, you haven't spoken. My apologies. You're not Michael. Please, yes. Who's that in the back? I can see a hand, but he's wearing a white shirt. Is that Adrian? Adrian, please come forward. Would you take your places by the microphone as I call you? Yes, thank you. It's Gerald, isn't it? Yes, thank you. Adrian, please come forward. Anyone else? Jerry Lewis, yes. Joe, is that Ella, did I see? Or is that a hand in front of Ella? No, that's fine. No, I'm going to try and avoid deputies who've already spoken. Forgive me. Yes, Richard.
Thank you, Mr. President. Richard Cohen, Loughton Federation. I think it's wonderful that we're going to have a special Balfour Day on the 29th of October this year. Having attended Committee Room 14 on the 29th of November, I can tell you that as far as the Balfour Declaration is concerned, there's no better historian than Andrew Roberts. He's written over 18 books, and if we are going to invite a historian, I would certainly recommend him. I would also like to say that this is something which I feel that any deputies who do have an aptitude for history should perhaps be members of a committee that you might want to appoint for this particular day. So that is my proposal. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Brian.
Brian Humphreys, Deputy for Pro-Zion, but a member of BODSA. Just a very quick comment on your answer to the BODSA question. You put a caveat about if this is the case about number of refugees and children admitted to UK. We did research this. Citizens UK managed to secure about 800 children from the Calais. The numbers who come in under the Dubs agreement is something like 250. It's tiny compared to the numbers that are eligible, and we do urge you to take further action.
Adrian Cohen, Deputy Highgate Synagogue. One of the deputies here who has been subject to some criticism this morning is a great supporter of Balfour Declaration. That's Lawrence Bross. So I just wanted to very quickly say something, which is that if we are going to have lengthy speeches from the platform about people treating other deputies with dignity and respect, I find it extraordinary that someone should make a statement belittling Lawrence because of having a holiday home in Herzliya. I mean, really, if we are going to start to refer to people in this personalised way and also to attack certain deputies and accuse them of being anti-Israel just because they have different views on Resolution 2334, then really I think that the atmosphere here, the truly democratic, pluralistic basis upon which this institution functions is seriously being undermined. I didn't have an opportunity to say that earlier, but I felt very strongly that I wanted to make that now. Thank you very much.
Joe Millis, Bromley Reform. Thank you, President, for putting out the views. Thank you also for bringing up the issue of being respectful of others. I hope this will now lead to people not using inflammatory language when they tweet, and also in their own manner in which they conduct themselves. One small point on my question, the second question. I feel that you say that you do not comment on internal Israeli affairs. That's, I'm afraid, somewhat debatable since you raised the issue of Herzog and Livni. You also do comment on issues such as the Trump election. That's also commenting on another foreign country's internal affairs. And I believe that perhaps the comparison on the Syria issue was a bit out of place. So please, first off, again, thank you. But secondly, secondly, the whole issue of commenting, let's keep it as we say. Bye-bye.
Jerry, you're the last speaker. Please proceed.
Jerry Lewis, Hampstead Synagogue. I don't want to keep up to my reputation of being controversial, but I want to say something which I tried to say last time, which does concern me very deeply. It concerns the incidents that took place at UCL just a few months ago. And it's something which worries me intensely. I have very good sources to say that after the meeting that was held by the President and senior members of the board, it was made very clear the issue was far from being black and white, and that there were incidents undertaken and something on video which we need to address at some stage as well. My simple thesis is this: there are groups in our community who are coming to campuses who have got nothing to do with students, who are interfering with what's going on at campus and putting our Jewish students at risk of their own safety. And that must stop. I am now going to ask the President to intervene with those groups, one of which I know is funded from Israel. And I was told while I was in Israel, they're doing these things to make sure they can justify the funding they get from Israel to try and make a point. It's an utter disgrace. And we've got to support our students properly by making sure that they are not put at risk any longer on any campus anywhere. Of course, I decry any attacks undertaken by Palestinian students on Jewish students. But there was a provocation by infiltrators who got nothing to do with campuses, who should never have been on the campuses, allowed on the campuses, and should be banned in future. And I hope you'll take that message back to the directors of the university when you have your next meeting. Could you bring us an update, please? Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. Richard Cohen, thank you for that suggestion. Brian Humphreys, I hear very clearly, I'll be consulting with other organisations about whether it would be appropriate for there to be a board intervention. Adrian Cohen, let me say straight away, I certainly didn't intend to belittle anyone. I was trying to make the point, perhaps I made it a bit too strongly, that having a home in Israel does not give one, because Lawrence introduced his remarks by saying he had a home in Israel. Nobody doubts Lawrence's commitment to the state of Israel, but I don't think having a home there gives one anything like the right to criticise in the same way as if you're an Israeli whose only home in only country is in Israel. That's the only point I was making. Joe Millis, I'm not sure I understood what your point was, Joe. Of course, it's not the case that the board can't ever comment on the affairs in another country. It's a question of how we comment and whether that country has a community that can speak for themselves. I hope I would never go beyond the boundaries in so doing. And I've simply again make the point that when it comes to Israel, it's a democratic country where the voters make their choices, and I think we should be very careful about giving them lectures. And I made the point also in regard to President-elect Trump that the Americans had made their democratic decision, so I was upholding their rights to do so. Jerry, I'm not sure if those remarks were actually particularly helpful generally. Let me say that the social media videos that caught the disturbances at UCL showed that they were violent and intimidatory and without any lawful excuse whatsoever. I can tell deputies that this week we contacted UCL to see if we could get an idea when the report of the investigation was going to be obtained, because it was going to be before the end of term. Then we were told it would be in January. It will, I'm told, is expected to be later this month or early February. And the fact that we have made a very gentle chase, I think, speaks for itself. I also want to make it clear to deputies, and by the way, I've already made it clear, I'm not in favour of outside groups going onto campuses, I don't think students really need or want to see people who are like their mums and dads and the same sorts of ages, not that of course I'm ageist about it, going onto campus. I think, however, I want to give students and UJS, and we're shortly going to hear from the president of UJS, and maybe he'll touch on that point if he thinks it necessary. I absolutely believe in their discretion and good sense to know what's best on campus. And I think for those who are not students, we should be very wary of intervening, and students should be allowed to get on with it. They're perfectly old enough and sensible enough to do it. And I'm certainly not in favour of outside groups raising the temperature for no reason, no good reason whatsoever. So that will be the end of my statement. We now have the reports of divisions. Let's start with the Defence Division, and you've got the report. Are there any questions for Marie? Marie may want to have a few words to start.
Thank you, Deputies. Can I present my report to you? We've had an extensive discussion already. The issue of campuses has come up, and we are waiting for Professor Rees's report. Can I just emphasise that he did promise it would be a robust report without fear nor favour, were his exact words, and as he's gone to a lot of trouble to investigate matters, I hope that we can bear with that to await the outcome of the report before commenting further. And I fully endorse what Jonathan has said about supporting UJS and that they're on campus. I think the report is quite extensive despite it being on 2 pages, but I'm very happy to take any questions. Would you like? Jonathan and Michael?
Yeah, that'll be it.
Please
then.
go to the...
Okay.
Jonathan Davis, Golders Green. Will the Defence Division consider whether it would be appropriate to make a complaint to Ofgem about the programme the series of programmes this week on Al Jazeera TV about the lobby, which, as well as a very unpleasant treatment of an individual member of this board, seemed to proceed entirely on the premise that BDS was right and any attack on BDS was improper? And that does seem to infringe the Ofgem obligation on impartiality and accuracy.
I'll answer the question at the end.
Ofcom.
Yeah, I understood what you meant. Don't worry. I'll answer your question after we've taken the next one. Thank you.
Okay, I would just like to make the comment, Michael Reich, Mosaic Reform, that at the end of the report you talk about interfaith engagements with the BAPS Mandir in Neasden, that this was very much a direct result of the initiatives that came from Mosaic Group in Harrow, and that Mosaic Group has built up a very good relationship with the Mandir in Neasden. That is Mosaic, which is a combination of Hatchend, Mazorti, Mosaic Reform, and Mosaic Liberal. In other words, 3 congregations of different types that work together. And also I'd like to say that Daniela Peers was also directly responsible that took place from the interfaith work. She was also directly involved in setting up these arrangements, and I think that should be mentioned down there. Okay? Thank you.
May I take the second point first? Thank you very much. We do absolutely appreciate all of the deputies and Constitution's efforts. We did all have a lot of input in relation to establishing relations in the Defence Division with the Hindu congregation, and we actually introduced Charlie from Mitzvah Day, who then took Daniela Pears down there. But since then, they hadn't met many Jews, but now they've met lots and lots of Jews, and we've got an excellent relationship, and there's a lot of people, including Mosaic, that are really contributing. Taking the first point first, in relation to Al Jazeera, my personal observations, this is an absolute load of absolute rubbish, and it's to be treated with the contempt that it deserves. But I think Ella Rose is wanting to say something. I think it's very brave that she wants to do so, and I hope that you will listen to what she's got to say. So thank you, Ella.
Hi, I'm Ella Rose. I'm the Deputy for Bush United, and I'm very much here in that capacity. But in my other life, when I'm not at the board, I'm the Director of the Jewish Labour Movement. Having JLM has been, caught in some of this Al Jazeera coverage, and it's been, well, personally a very tough week for me, but it's right for me to say thank you for the outpouring of love, not just from the board and many members of the top table, but from the community itself. And we are, as JLM, and I know as a community, considering an Ofcom complaint as part of our course going forwards, and I hope that we'll be joined and supported by that. And I think all that's really left to say, you know, if, like me, you believe in creating a fair, progressive and equal society, and you want to see the Labour Party that's rid of anti-Semitism and has a safe space for Jews in it, and you want to, you know, if you think about voting Labour or you support Labour, join the Jewish Labour movement and stand with me in this fight. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ella. We really appreciate that. That's the end of my report for this week. Thank you.
Thank you to Ella and to all those who were treated so disgracefully in this so-called expose. You have our full support, and I wrote to Ella accordingly. Sheila.
Yes, thank
Community
you.
and Education Division report.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I commend my report to you. I would like to thank at this point all the board staff and the deputies who have helped me with all the hard work that is ongoing in what we're doing. And just a brief update on the second page about our Judaism GCSE Religious Studies by Clive Lawton. We have an update on the amount of these books that have been sold. We've now sold nearly 300 print copies, over 100 PDF, and raised £6,000. So I would like to just let you know that. And now I'm happy to take any questions or comments. Thank you.
Chaim Ben-Zion, St Albans, Masalty. May I make a sort of public thank you to all of the deputies who helped with the Jewish Living Experience exhibition in St Albans. Many of them are here today. We had over 30 volunteers, and I think Sheila would agree that it was a huge success.
Thank you, Chaim. Yes, I agree. And we've also actually been asked to go back to St Albans. We're in the process of arranging new dates to take the exhibition back to the Mazorti Shul in St Albans. Thank you. Roger, yes.
Roger Winfield, Liberal Jewish Synagogue. I'm always amazed and in awe of the people who devote so much time to the Jewish, what's it now called? Jewish Living
Exhibition.
Experience, not the Jewish Way of Life exhibition. So thank you very much. But as recent figures from the Institute of Jewish Public Policy show, there are an increasing number of mainstream Jewish children go to Jewish schools. And therefore, the result is likely to be that a high proportion of Jewish children are being brought up with limited knowledge of and involvement with mainstream British culture, which I think must be a realistic concern. Will the board take steps to promote knowledge and understanding of Christianity, in particular by Jewish school children? Thank you.
Thank you, yes. Our Jewish schools are actually state schools that follow the national curriculum, and these topics, these concerns that you have are actually addressed so that the Jewish children are given a fully rounded view of being British citizens. We have Ofsted inspections as well as our Pekuach inspections, and I'm sure we don't get involved hands-on with the curriculum in Jewish schools, but I've been assured that they do follow the national curriculum in this area. But thank you for your observation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Deputies, we'll move to Finance and Organisation. Stuart.
Okay, I'm going to assume that you've all read with the utmost interest the Treasurer's report, so I'm simply going to fill in one or two gaps and bring you up to date with some things that have happened even over the last week. Firstly, the 2017 budget has been examined in detail by the honorary officers at our meeting last week. It is currently undergoing a secondary scrutiny process through the relevant working group drawn from the FNO, and it will also be gone through by the FNO. All things being equal, we should be in a position to present you with the budget at the next board meeting, and we hope to have a workshop at which it'll be possible to take questions about that. That's one thing. I will also bring you up to date with what's happened with the work done by the relevant working group on our reserve. We have been through a pretty extensive, detailed process helped by an external professional investment advisor, whereby we have whittled down a long list of potential investment managers to a short list. We put them through a beauty parade, having undergone a tender process, and in the end we recommended, the working group and I, to the HOs that we would appoint 2 firms. Just for the record, our external investment advisor is called John Lamb, L-A-M-B, London-based. For the record, the 2 investment managers who are beginning to, or are on the point of deploying the first of the investment money into the markets are Stonehague Fleming, and the other one is, well, Stonehague Fleming and Willis Towers Watson. If you don't know about them, look them up. But the board is going to have its money managed in a fairly conservative, but we hope capital gains and income generative way going forward, and one that allows us flexibility to meet contingencies, whether they be crises or real estate. Aside from that, the main development is that the working group around organisation is soon going to be presenting its proposals both to the FNO and then ultimately, and thanks to Richard and the working group on that, to the deputies. And these are, I must stress, proposals. Richard may actually go into this more.
Any questions for Stuart? Nick, yes. You've had one go, Brian, very quickly, and that would be anyone else? Right, thank you. Okay.
Nick Beck, Brighton and Hove Reform. Stuart, this is a very small query, but actually I think it's endemic of other things. In November, I went up to Wrexham. I put in an expense claim that was put in December the 4th. I got an email from Jackie, nobody can sign cheques. This was in January. And basically, and therefore I can't be paid yet, and my expenses. Now, they're not very much, I mean, a couple of £100, but the fact is, I can't believe an organisation like this has got a situation that cheques can't be written.
Can I stop you there? I've actually signed them off.
I haven't received it.
So you haven't received it, but it's been signed off.
We're 7 weeks, I mean, it can't be that this...
We'll deal with this on Monday.
Sorry?
This is.
I think we should better take this offline, if you don't mind. Can I also thank you, Nick, we'll make sure you are reimbursed. I'm sorry about the delay. Can I also make sure that deputies know we don't actually use cheques anymore, we use direct banking, which is more secure. Brian?
Brian Humphreys, Pro-Zion. After the last meeting of the board, I put forward to the FNO a suggestion which I believe has a potential for raising quite large amounts of income. The FNO report doesn't contain any reference to other sources of income apart from the dinner, and I just would like to be assured that this is going to be looked into, and any other suggestions welcome.
Absolutely, and had I had more time, I would have thanked you for that suggestion, as well as Richard's today. The HOs have been looking at fundraising strategy over and beyond our main income sources going forward. And that is something that we're hoping to be able to put into place to take us through the next year, 18 months, because in fact income is actually our main focus going forward. We've brought in a lot of the controls we needed. We've brought in, we've rationalized a lot of the expenditures. And thank you and everyone else who has been sending in suggestions. They have not been forgotten at all, and many of them will be acted on in due course. We're likely to have an open meeting for people who have suggestions like that reasonably soon, at which we can actually record all of these and see what we can action.
Thank you. International Division, Richard.
Thank you, Jonathan, and Happy New Year, deputies. I know you will have read the 2-page report. Just 2 small things to add that have happened recently. You'll have seen, hopefully, in the community briefing that we met with the Polish ambassador for a very constructive meeting last week. More on that in the community briefing. And just to note, of course, there's a peace conference in Paris today looking at the Middle East, interestingly with no Israelis or Palestinians, but nevertheless the French are trying to lead on that and obviously will respond accordingly. Happy to take any questions or comments on the report.
Deputies, thank you very much. I do want to say thanks to all deputies who sit on divisions and to my vice presidents. You can see how much goes on day to day. I know I seem to take a lot of the brunt of the questions, but I speak for a lot of my colleagues. And the board is on any basis a very hard-working organisation. The officers, as you know, we're all volunteers, but we are hugely supported by our professional staff, and I just want to thank all of those who've contributed to these reports. It's now my pleasure to invite the President of the Union of Jewish Students, Josh Sietler, to address us. We regularly receive reports and presentations from the President of the Union of Jewish Students. In my time as Vice President, we doubled UJS's representation on the board. We hugely value student representation on the board, just as our community hugely regards and respects the Union of Jewish Students, the envy of Jewish student organisations the world over, as I hear frequently. Officers of our union frequently become leading lights in the European and world bodies of Jewish students, and it's a great pleasure to invite Josh Sietler now to address us. Josh.
Hi. Good morning, good afternoon it is now. Good afternoon, everybody. I apologise for my cold. I'm from Manchester, so some people here will understand me. Others probably won't. Good afternoon. I'd like to start by introducing myself. My name is Josh Sietler, and I'm the President of the Union of Jewish Students of the UK and Ireland. Thank you. As I'm sure you're all aware, time and time again, Jewish students are the subjects of discussions in newspapers, on the television, and around the Shabbat table. If you were expecting me to stand here and tell you about all the difficulties that Jewish students face in the UK, then I'm sorry, you're probably going to be rather disappointed. I won't dwell on the challenges or the problems that could present themselves on campus. Recent media coverage has made those very, very clear. I'm here to tell you another narrative, one that's rarely in the headlines, the one in which Jewish students lead the debate and set the agenda on their own university campuses. I have a very difficult task this morning, and indeed every single day that I stand up to represent the people who elected me. I represent 8,500 Jewish students on 64 university campuses across the United Kingdom. They're a pretty diverse population, I assure you. Some of them are Orthodox, others are Reform, others still are Masorti or Liberal, and some are just Jewish. Within each of those denominations, there are religiously observant students and there are non-observant students. There are students who are culturally Jewish, but not religiously so. There are students on the political left, there are students on the political right, and there are some who just don't really care about politics. My job is to represent all of them. And my point is that it will be impossible for me to generalize anything about Jewish students. The alternative is pretty tough too, since I just don't have the time to list all the fantastic things that Jewish students continue to do every single day on campuses from Aberdeen to Exeter. But I would like to try and paint the real picture of campus life in the UK today. It would have been amazing if I could bring all 8,500 students in front of you and we could listen to them, hear what they really feel about university life. But unfortunately, you stuck with me, so I'll do my best for the next few minutes. Let's look at November as an example. We had Interfaith Week, which saw 15 different Jewish society events around the country. Jewish students work with faith societies at their universities to host events like Banjo Night, that's bring a non-Jew over, open mic quiz nights, volunteering opportunities, and even a speed faithing event. This wasn't an isolated week either. Jewish students consistently stand up tall and proud for what they believe in. This brings me to Mitzvah Day. 14 JSOCs really led on social action. They held food drives for local food banks and volunteered across the country. This year, Mitzvah Day coincided with UJS's annual summit, where we were joined by over 140 Jewish student leaders, as well as guests from around the community. At Summit, students came to learn about how to best facilitate Jewish life on their campuses. The discussions were not about how to protect themselves in the face of anti-Semitism or how to best hide an Israel Society event, but rather the conversations were of a slightly different nature. Conversations such as how to create spaces that are welcoming to all students within a JSOC, or how to ensure that student unions understand the importance of commemorating Holocaust Memorial Day. November also saw Shabbat UK, during which students from the largest and the smallest Jewish societies all celebrated Shabbat in their own ways, however best suited their small campus communities. I am so proud that at UJS we supported every single one of these events. Personally, I went to Glasgow and had a great Shabbat spent staying with the chaplains and eating a Friday night meal at the local shul on a table full of students. I was also lucky that the St Andrew's JSOC ball fell just after Shabbat, and I was able to end the weekend with hundreds of Jewish students and their friends doing what Jewish students do best. As you may have seen, Jewish students are also keen to add their voices to what the Jewish community is doing for Syrian refugees. With less than 24 hours' notice, UJS pulled together an emergency rally for Aleppo in Parliament Square that was attended by over 100 students who travelled from campuses as far away as Oxford and Birmingham. I am excited to say that we are expanding our work in this area. As you may have seen, we have our Flickers of Hope digital campaign over Hanukkah, which highlighted 8 different ways to spread the light for people in Syria across the 8 nights of Hanukkah. And if you didn't see it, why don't you like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter? And I've saved the best until last. In the coming months, Glasgow, Leeds, Manchester, Birmingham, Nottingham and London will be hosting either a JSOC ball or a Booze for Jews. I think this highlights the reality of life on campus for Jewish students. Most Jewish students just want to have a good time with their friends and leave with a good degree. When you think about it, it's not so different to any other students. Even when campus can be hostile, it's so clear that Jewish students continue to thrive, taking part in their JSOCs and beyond, and shaping the narrative around a huge variety of issues. As we all know, Israel comes under attack all too often on British campuses, and it's often assumed that Jewish students will be the ones that will defend it. Jewish students are automatically seen as the ambassadors of the State of Israel, and in some instances, the defenders of its very existence. We need to acknowledge 2 things. One, whilst many Jewish students do work tirelessly to advocate for Israel, we are also lucky to have the support of non-Jewish students. They also do these things of their own volition. And 2, there are Jewish students who may not support Israel. They may not support its current government. They may not even support either. UJS is a place for all Jewish students. And just like we cannot fathom excluding someone because of their religious observance, we cannot and we will not exclude someone because of their political views. There were those who said that I, an Orthodox man, could not legitimately represent 8,500 Jewish students, and I am proud to have proven them wrong. And my background has only made me more determined to ensure that UJS is constantly seeking to become as inclusive as possible, and I will not stand here and apologize for that. But going back to Israel on campus, the debate seems very, very clear from here. There are those who seek to demonize the only democracy in the Middle East and hold it to standards not expected of any other country, and the opposition clearly stands against the legitimacy of that country. I won't stand here and debate politics, but I will say that the conversation is nowhere near as simple as that. Discussions are complex and detailed. Students are expected to know things that they were not taught in schools, and debate about a country that they do not even live in. I was the president of the LSE Student Union Israel Society, and I learned something very important at my time there, which is this: there is no one who understands students better than those who are on campus. I've been on campus for 6 months now, and already the conversations are starting to change. If we are to really help Jewish students fight for Israel, then it has to start with listening to what they actually want, rather than telling them what we think they need. I would like to use Bristol University as an example. The conversation around the Israel-Palestine conflict is not one of aggression, but one of constructive debate. Jewish students are leading the conversation in ways that they understand. This is why UJS never creates campaigns without the direct input of the students beforehand. We continue to create campaigns such as Bridges Not Boycotts, which we made in conjunction with the Board of Deputies to tackle anti-Semitism and anti-Israel sentiment on campus, in accordance with our mandated policy of working towards a two-state solution and combating BDS. This is especially important given that Israeli Apartheid Week is coming up at the end of February. Who else is excited? By telling students how they should be acting on campus, because we remember what it was like in our day, not only is often highly ineffective in the constantly changing conversations on campus, but actually limits the ability of Jewish students to act in ways that are best for themselves. Next time you'd like to offer advice to a Jewish student about fighting for Israel, please ask them what they want, rather than telling them what you think they need. And if you don't know any students, come to UJS, because we know thousands. Nevertheless, no one should think that we are not aware of the growing and menacing threat of anti-Semitism. CST recorded 27 campus-related incidents for the months January to June in 2016. This is nearly triple the number for the same period for the previous year. 2016 saw the revelations from the Oxford University Labour Club, violence and intimidation at King's College London and UCL, and a candidate who NUS had previously disciplined for indulging in anti-Semitic rhetoric actually becoming elected and becoming the president of NUS. No one takes anti-Semitism on campus more seriously than UJS, ably and hugely supported by the CST. We've trained over 200 student union leaders in the past year, met with dozens of vice-chancellors, taken NUS and SU leaders to Poland, had comprehensive definitions of anti-Semitism endorsed locally and nationally, and advised on hate crime guidance from Universities UK for all institutions to better tackle anti-Semitism. The challenge is real, and we are responding to it. But please be assured that every day on almost every campus, and almost every day on the handful of the other campuses, Jewish students live safe, full, and free lives, expressing their diverse Jewish identities and relationships with Israel. It makes it really difficult for us to do our jobs when other people claim to know what's best for Jewish students. If you have a broken arm, you don't go to the optician. Likewise, if you want to know what's going on with Jewish students, the best thing to do is go straight to the experts. Myself and my team are all recent graduates. We are on campus and on the phone to students every single day of the week. And I'm not saying we want to do it alone. We know that the Jewish community is always strongest when it's united. And we are always grateful for the support of those in the community who want to dedicate their valuable time to supporting Jewish students. But let's do it together. Let's work with each other, with all the knowledge and all the resources that we have, to make sure that in 6 months, when I hand over to my successor, Jewish students are thriving on campus even more than they were a year ago. And when he hands over to his successor, the situation is even more improved, ad so infinitum. It will be right to assume that times must be tough for Jewish students in the UK. The current NUS president is still yet to apologise for her anti-Semitic comments, and we are seeing graphic images of pro-Israel events being protested against, and Jewish students forced to move venues for their own security. But now we know this is not the whole picture. I would like to close by setting everybody a challenge. Go, find a Jewish student, phone one up, stop one in the street, and ask them what life is really like for them on campus. And if I'm wrong, come and tell me. But I assure you, the reality is far more positive than it seems, and we should not be telling students what they're feeling, rather listening to what they have to say and hearing their stories. My great-grandmother Naomi Perlman has always taught me that a wise person isn't one who always has the answers, but one who knows where to look. There is no better way to get answers about campus life than from the students themselves and the union who represents them. Thank you very much.
I'd like to congratulate Josh, but we've got time first for a couple of questions. Denise, Natalie, anyone else who hasn't spoken? Please come.
Denise Lester, South Hampstead United Synagogue, and an ex-law student at Manchester University. So there's a lot of warmth. I'm not sure if you're from the south or the north, but anyway. Couple of observations. First of all, it struck me that your role is actually very similar to that of our president of the Board of Deputies in terms of having to formulate an overarching view and be quite diplomatic, or not as the case may be very much in the front line. And so, from a leadership perspective, I'd like to see you personally very much one day being here as a long-term deputy. And I'd like to, because I think your speech was most impressive, and I'd also like to say that to me, having been involved in UJS and ball organisations, the expression of outward Jewishness and the proud identity which UJS exemplifies is actually a breeding ground for future deputies and communal leaders generally. I don't know if there is the link in terms of a leadership development programme communally, but there ought to be. More specifically, though, the question I do have to ask of you is that you mentioned, for example, that you have ball activities at certain major known universities where there is the significant mass. But
Denise, can you just ask the question?
The smaller communities, what specific support do you provide for the smaller communities, i.e. a student on a campus, say at Aston or somewhere which hasn't got a specific large Jewish presence, please? Thank you.
Do you want to take the questions at the end or together?
Denise, I think you had your question. Okay.
Sure. Natalie Shaw, Barnet United Synagogue. One of our synagogue members, Izzy Langer, unfortunately, as you're probably aware, suffered quite a lot of difficulties on campus, and particularly at the behest of some people within NUS in the last year. We were very honoured and very proud of Izzy for her recent award from the World Union of Jewish Students in this regard. But we wonder what additional support can be given to people like Izzy who do actually face situations which actually put their own mental health in jeopardy on campus. And we as a synagogue will not stand by and see one of our members suffer in this way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bruce?
Bruce Greenberg from Northampton Hebrew Congregation. Thank you for your presentation, very informative. When I was in college a few years ago, actually many years ago, I was involved with two Jewish organizations that helped me greatly, very advantageous during those 4 years. A Jewish fraternity, Alpha Epsilon Pi, or AE Pi, and also Hillel. Do those have an active presence here in the UK? Jewish fraternities, sororities, as well as Hillel. Thank you.
Sure. Shall I take? I think I'll take the last question first. I think it makes the most sense. Yes, fraternities. Do they exist? Slightly. They do exist. They have a presence on UK campuses. Jewish fraternities. API does exist in the UK. There were two sororities that appear to be springing up, falling down at different periods. Hillel does not exist as an organisation in the UK. UJS works as the overarching body of Jewish students and Jewish societies to help facilitate, like happens with Hillel in America, with Jewish students, their welfare and their facilities on campus. So thank you very much for that question. To the first question, Denise, about small JSOCs, I think it's very, very important that we understand that there are 64 different Jewish societies in the UK. They're from the north of Scotland to the bottom of England. And every single JSOC is somewhat different. Some have more students in it, some have less students in it. But it doesn't mean to say that they don't all have their own small communities and they don't all do their own thing their own way. So I'll pick Lancaster as an example. They're always the ones that people talk about. I know there are 10 or 15, maybe not even, members of the Jewish Society, of which maybe 5 or 7 come to meetings every week. They have a bagel lunch on a Wednesday or Thursday sometimes, and they have a Friday night dinner as a very small community. And UJS helps these smaller JSOCs as much as we help the larger JSOCs. We have a fund available for every single individual JSOC. We also help them with organisation and logistics. But also we have a new transport fund that was something that was in my manifesto, that to bring those from the smaller JSOCs to the larger regional hubs, which makes the most sense, because if we're not going to have a boost for Jews or a JSOC ball for 12 people, but if there's one within 20, 30 miles, it would make sense for us to facilitate them going and taking part in that, which is why we had the Northern Shabbaton last year, which was for Scotland and the Northern JSOC. So all the small regional JSOCs came together for a weekend. So I hope that answers that question sufficiently. In regards to Izzy Lenga, I was there with her at the World Union of Jewish Students. Of course, we condemn all the hate that she receives, and we're vocal in our support for her on social media as well as on other platforms. But it's important that we work with communal organisations such as the Board of Deputies, as well as CST, to fight the hate that is seen on social media, particularly against students. We see a lot of hate. People can hide behind computers, sitting in their bedrooms in goodness knows where, tweeting hate, putting pictures of students in places like Auschwitz, which is absolutely disgraceful and disgusting. And we can see that on social media against my friends and peers. And it's important that us, with the help of CST and the community and the government and the police, to fight this sort of hate on all the platforms that we see it. And we will continue to offer Izzy support as well as other students who face similar abuse. Thank you.
I'd like to thank Josh for his very impressive speech and answering the questions. I think there's just some important messages I want to emphasise from what Josh has said to us today. The first is it's very important to stress that the vast majority of Jewish students experience a very positive life on campus and they continue to thrive. I think we all need to understand that. The second one is there's a wide divergence of views on Israel, even amongst students, and UJS has said they're a very safe place to give support to those students who have a different political and religious view of Israel on campus. That's also very important. And thirdly, it is difficult because they're not taught how to deal with these issues at home. It really is a learning process. We're very proud that you worked with us on Bridges Not Boycotts, and we at the Board of Deputies are here to support you, and thank you for coming today, and I will be with you shortly in your workshop. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Deputies, before Richard has the last word to tell you about the last 25 minutes of the meeting and the workshops we're going to have, I want to take a leaf out of the Today programme and perhaps highlight some of the Twitter feed that we've been getting in the meeting, about the meeting from out there. And someone has tweeted, fewer than 1% of British Jews take part in elections for the Board of Deputies. How can the Board President claim it is representative? Well, I would say to the person who tweeted that, it can't be right. 1% of our community is about 3,000 people. Now, of course, the community of the 300,000 Jews that there are, some are going to be children. Probably quite a large proportion. They're not going to vote. But my own shul has 2,200 members, and while I won't say that all of them vote in elections, they all have the right to vote, and some avail themselves of it and some don't. And my shul and my whatever body one belongs to, pretty much every significant community and every Jewish organisation elects deputies, often, increasingly often, in contested elections. And that may not be 300,000 or even 299,000, but it's a pretty hefty proportion of British Jews who are commonly engaged. Now, I accept that there's an issue. What about a Jew who's not commonly engaged at all, not a member of any congregation, not a member of any Jewish body at all? Well, I'm sorry. If you want to have a voice on the Board of Deputies and you think that your views are entitled to be represented on the board, so join a community or an organisation. How can you expect to be communally unattached, deliberately sitting away from the community and the decision-making bodies and sitting on the sidelines? If you want to sit on the sidelines, fine, but don't snipe at the organisation which is in the centre of events. So that's my answer to that tweet. Richard. The next board meeting. No, the executive report. Oh, sorry. Oh, I've forgotten the executive report. Actually, the executive report's covered all matters that we heard before, and we had any other matters in the President's statement. So I've covered the executive report. Yeah, that's right. coming to an internet near you now, close to you now. Deputies, I look forward to seeing you on the 19th of February here at 11:15, and Richard will now introduce the workshops.
Thank you, Jonathan. We have 4 workshops for you to choose from today. If you want to get an even deeper handle on campus, what's going on, then Josh, who we just heard from, along with his campaigns director, Josh Nagley, will be doing a workshop entitled Campus, What's Going On? And that's going to be happening right here in the front of the room. So if you'd like to be part of that, please do move forward shortly. Sheila is going to be running a workshop promoting small communities. If you want to get involved, we've heard a lot about that already today. She'd be delighted to hear from you, and that's going to take place right in the far corner as I look from the podium up here. Jonathan, as ever, will be available for his President's surgery. If there's anything that you didn't quite have the chance to raise today, he will be delighted to hear from you, and he'll remain on the stage. And then Simon Harkhauser and I will be leading a workshop on the role of a deputy. As you've heard from Stuart, we're going to be raising the first draft for your consideration of various changes to this organisation to help us be even more effective. And we're going to be running a few of those ideas through with you just to test the water. So if you'd like to be with us on that, we're going to be in the middle on this side. Workshops will finish as ever at 1:30, and I particularly will dash off as we are very much looking forward to the International Division's Team Away Day, which is happening straight after this meeting. Thank you as ever. A reminder, if you want to be in the campus workshop, right to the front. If you want to be in promoting small communities, right to the back. If you want to be with Jonathan up here, and the role of a deputy in the middle. Thank you, and have a lovely month.